Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Nerd Switch podcast. My name is Dylan, and joining me once again today is my good friend and fellow nerd, Jeremiah.
Hello everyone, good to see you again.
Hello, my friend. Also joining us back again from a couple previous episodes is Mr. Tony.
Hello, I am back. Proud to be here.
So today we're just doing another sort of general discussion. It's not going to be anything too crazy, but we're just talking about something we all kind of like and that's a little relevant right now, which is a long-running franchise by the name of Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
Five. Picks one of the worst ones. So yeah, we're just going to kind of talk about it. I'm probably going to label this as a retrospective, but it's definitely not a retrospective in the sense that people would probably expect. Like, we're not doing a lore dump or like a whole story rundown. If you are looking for that, you know, there's a lot of YouTube videos that have probably done it better than we could do it anyways. So we're just going to kind of talk about a franchise we like and break it down and have some fun with it, hopefully. So with that, let's go ahead and flip the switch and dive into our semi-Resident Evil retrospective. Know any Resident Evil music.
I don't either. It's all eerie music.
Yeah. What's one? I need a Leon one-liner. What is Leon? Leon. Good enough.
So some like weird, cringy stuff in the original Resident Evil 4. I can't remember though.
Even the remake.
Does he still do that?
Not as cool. Bad, but you'll notice like when he deals with a group of enemies out of nowhere, he'll just be like, ew.
Honestly, like I messed around with like some of his controls in the recent remake, and like if you just spam tap his aim button, he'll go. Just when he aims, it's really funny.
We will have a Resident Evil 4 remake review at some point in the near future, so we'll probably avoid talking about that game for now. But I guess for those who are unfamiliar, what is Resident Evil? It's a game that first came out. The very first Resident Evil was 1996, super old school, but like very much revolutionary for its time. I did not play many of the original Resident Evils, which we'll kind of dive more into when we kind of go game by game with the franchise, but the basis is it's just like zombies and stuff.
And stuff.
Yeah, a lot of and stuff the more the series goes on, for sure. But yeah, it's originated in Japan under the title Biohazard, but due to some copyright shenanigans, they had to swap it over, and they ended up with Resident Evil, which is a interesting title.
But I like it.
Yeah, it works. Cool. But yeah, it's a long-running franchise. I mean, 1996 with the first game. If you're counting the mainline entries, you know, it's like 10 to 12 games, depending on which ones you consider to be mainline. But if you're looking at every entry in the game, you're looking at like 30 to 60 if you start to count like mobile games and stuff. So it's a very, very big franchise. But so we just want to talk about it since we're in the midst of playing Resident Evil 4 and we'll be reviewing it. We just kind of wanted to look back at the series and kind of talk about why we like it. So yeah. So with how it started in 1996, and this is the thing that for me kind of bars me from going back and playing these games, but you had like a fixed camera where it would basically play like you're watching from one perspective of a hallway while your character moves around within it. And I can't stand it, but that's how it started for like the first 3 games.
Yes, this is true.
But the one thing that I really admire about Resident Evil is kind of how this series has really evolved and everything that the games have done. It does a lot as a franchise. Like, you started with that fixed camera perspective. The original Resident Evil 4 was the first game to really take the series and kind of adjust it in a way that ended up being really beneficial. Everyone that I know, at least that's played the original, like, loves it, Resident Evil 4. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a nostalgia trip for me as well. That's probably the first survival horror game I played, but we'll kind of get to it. at some point here. And then, you know, onward to the modern action era, Resident Evil 5 and 6, which are kind of not fondly adored by the community.
I feel like they're not fondly adored, but they will never be forgotten.
Yeah. Being rememberable for being bad, though, is not what I think you want.
This is true.
Yeah, and then all the way up to the more recent entries with Resident Evil 7 and 8, which kind of swapped it again over to a first-person's perspective, which really worked for it. So a lot of cool stuff that they've done to evolve it, and they've experimented a little. Like, you've had some multiplayer Resident Evil titles, which I don't think were too good. I don't know. I didn't play them. But
The recent one looked kind of decent from what I've seen.
like the RE verse or whatever.
Yeah.
I want Resident Evil Battle Royale.
They're
kind of
already
what
in
I've seen some of
Fortnite.
them.
Yeah.
They don't need to go anywhere else.
Some of them have kind of been like you pick your character and then you can like trade off to being like a mutated character by playing the multiplayer or whatever.
Okay.
I've never played any of them because they don't work as well, but they're very different because
Yeah.
they combine all games together, which was very interesting.
Okay.
Kind of remind me of like Dead by Daylight or something.
Got
A
it.
little bit, yeah.
I do like Dead by Daylight. It's a fun time. Like, if they did something like that, I think it's just, it needs competence in the development.
I mean, even Dead by Daylight, I'm pretty sure they brought in a Resident Evil skin. For
Yeah,
it.
they did.
They put like Nemesis in or something.
One of them. I don't remember.
I'm
But
pretty
yeah.
sure it was Nemesis.
He's like the most well known.
So, with that, we're going to kind of go game by game as we discuss it. I think we're not, I mean, obviously there'll probably be spoilers, so if there's any particular title that you haven't played, you know, maybe be aware. But we're just talking about a thing we love and enjoy. And with that, Resident Evil 1, like I said, didn't play it. I did play a little bit of the remaster, but again, just for me, that camera angle is, I can't do it.
I can't do it.
Did either of you guys play the original?
I played a little bit of it, but as like a young child because it was on my GameCube,
Yeah.
and I barely remember anything of it. I just remember the main case, and then like getting into like the start of the game, and I was just like, nope, can't do it. I'm too scared.
Yeah, it would be scary, depending on how old you are when you start with the series. I do love a lot, because like Resident Evil 1 kind of introduced some of the flagship characters, like you had Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine and like Barry Burton, and I do really like Whisker. I do like a lot of the characters that the series has, but Resident Evil 1 I don't think has aged probably super well, even with like the remaster. I know there was a lot of stuff with the dialogue being pretty corny and
Oh yeah, it's cheesy.
Yeah, probably.
you were almost a Jill sandwich. So yeah, I don't have too much on Resident Evil 1, and I mean, if we're just looking at like the core Resident Evil games, chronologically it starts with Resident Evil 0, which I definitely have not played.
I haven't either.
Yeah.
No? Okay, so we could skip that one. But Resident Evil 2, probably one that I think a lot of people pin being the better of the series, which for the purpose of what we have played, when we refer to like 2 and 3, we're probably just mainly going to talk about the remakes, because I know we have at least played or are more familiar with those ones. But so yeah, I didn't play the initial release for pretty much any of these. Like my first Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 4, but the remakes are very good. So if we're talking about the Resident Evil 2 remake, it's like, oh boy.
Oh,
It's fantastic.
Yeah, never played the original, but 2 just does so much so well. And I mean, we recently reviewed the Dead Space remake, and like right now, those are the 2 remakes that I think should be like the standard going forward if you're looking at remaking a game. I'm still mad at The Last of Us for their quote remake, unquote. But
It didn't need a remake because it still looked pretty good
Yeah.
before.
yeah.
well, and it's like I don't think you're remaking a game if all you're doing is just giving it like a facelift and some adjustments with audio and stuff. Because I know when it comes to like assets that were used, The Last of Us didn't change that much with its remake.
Mm-hmm.
But like Dead Space and Resident Evil 2 definitely changed a lot. Where Resident Evil 2 initially was like that fixed camera, same as Resident Evil 1. But the remake, give you the third person over the shoulder, really modernized controls, still keeping a lot of the fun stuff, like with how the game handles save rooms and your inventory and all that good stuff. I think the remakes actually used like Resident Evil 4's inventory system, didn't they?
Yeah, the remakes were definitely. It almost seems like they made Resident Evil 2 and 3 in mind, knowing they would eventually tackle 4.
Yeah.
It just did seem like that.
Yeah, and I know two brought the Tyrant
Yes.
as
Mr. X.
I know they changed how he kind of worked.
Go give it to you.
But yeah, Mr. X was a fantastic part of that game and also a very stressful part of that game.
Yeah.
It was great.
I'd just be enjoying my life, grabbing some like green herbs, and then you just hear the stomp, stomp, stomp.
Opens the door.
Instant anxiety.
The most like scariest part is the library where you're like, I climbed this ladder, he can't get me, and he just jumps the whole spike, starts climbing, like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, so good. And yeah, just everything that 2 did, like having the 2 campaigns where you can either play as Leon or Claire. I always liked playing as Leon first, then doing the second playthrough as Claire, but I know the order kind of changes that depending on how you do it, but it's just so good.
I liked them. They were very good.
Yeah. But jumping from 2 to Resident Evil 3, which is kind of more interesting to talk about, because I know the original Resident Evil 3 is, for a lot of people, the best in the series. I feel like 2, 3, and 4 are kind of the ones that are fighting for many people's favorite title. But the original release, Resident Evil 3, held up as being very good, but the remake kind of a little more controversial and not so much. And this is an example where 2's remake was so successful that they're like, okay, we got to get 3, get it out the door. People are going to buy it while they're talking about 2. And then as a result, 3 is rushed, 3 is missing some content from the original game, and 3 kind of not super favorable to a lot of people.
Well, what's funny is they paralleled the original timeline of how they made those 2 games.
Yeah.
Because when they first made Resident Evil 2, they pumped out 3 very shortly after. However, making a decent game with the same assets in the same limited amount of time back in the day could produce a better quality game, whereas now you think with all the tools we have that it would be the same, but it's not. It's just so much more work, and it turned out like a shittier a crappier version.
Yeah, no, I agree. They do have assets they could reuse, which definitely helps the development process. I think they just got a little lazy in terms there's entire sections of 3 that just aren't there. Which, again, I never played the original 3, but this is one I kind of looked up to see what was missing. And I know stuff like the clock tower. Certain boss fights were missing with, a giant millipede or something.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's just kind of lazy development. I mean, I don't care if things take time to come out, but it's going to hurt a lot more if you get an incomplete game, and it's noticeable because you have a direct thing to compare it to. So, yeah, 3 kind of not as loved. I still enjoy it. But it's very short.
It is very short. You can definitely rush through that one really fast.
Yeah, it's 4, maybe 5 hours if you take your time. But
yeah,
it's a good speedrun game.
Yeah, speedrun it in an hour and a half or less.
Pretty much.
So yeah, it's a game. I know they also kind of. It's weird because Resident Evil 2 made Mr. X better, where Resident Evil 3 arguably made Nemesis worse.
Yeah.
Because he's no longer a stalker enemy outside of the first part of the game, which is an interesting decision considering how much praise Mr. X got.
Mm-hmm.
And in the original, he was in the game constantly.
Oh yeah,
it felt like
he followed you all over the damn place.
Yep.
So yeah, but chronologically, the next one would be Resident Evil Code Veronica, which I know nothing about. Another one I just haven't played.
I've heard some good things for that one.
Yeah.
I have a friend that's played it that he says it's been pretty good.
I know this is one that they're also kind of thinking about remaking, kind of modernizing.
Yeah, I've heard instead of 5, they're thinking of doing Veronica.
Yeah, 5 does not need to be remade.
I mean, it arguably 5 and 6 need to be remade the most because of how bad they are.
Yeah, I guess if we're like remaking it for the
but
sake
they'd have
of
to change the entire game.
yeah, there's remaking for the sake of like just modernizing a classic, and then there's remaking for the sake of replacing a old crappy game with a better game. So if they take that angle, sure. But jumping up from there chronologically, the next one, Resident Evil 4, the classic. Like I mentioned, definitely my first experience with survival horror. I think
Same.
it was not too long after Resident Evil 4 that I went over to Dead Space and saw a lot of those parallels because Dead Space is based, or not based on, but inspired by Resident Evil 4.
That's cool. I actually didn't know that until
Yeah.
you had told us about it.
So yeah, that game's just very good, and we just got a remake for it, so we're not going to talk too much about it because we'll be doing a review on it, but it's just a classic 2005 action horror game. Has a lot of cheese.
It's pretty fun. I'm liking it.
Yeah. Up from there, this is kind of...
Hold on a second. You want to hear a little story time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, when I first played... Well, I didn't play it, but I watched my neighbor play Resident Evil 4. And I was like 10 when it came out or something. So, I was pretty sheltered as a kid too, so I didn't like experience like a lot of horror games and stuff. So like I was like on the edge of my seat watching him play it the whole time. So I was like, "Oh, this is crazy scary." And then we went to my house afterwards and we watched Saw, and I was 100 times more scared watching Resident Evil 4 than I was when I watched Saw.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I don't think not a Saw episode by any means, but Saw is just Saw exists for a very particular reason, and I don't think it's to scare you.
Yes,
Gore
true.
fetish.
Yeah. But yeah, Resident Evil 4, like just the original game, and this is something we'll definitely talk about with like the remake, kind of how they changed the gameplay for it, but the initial release of 4, like if you're aiming, you can't move.
Yeah.
And I think that by far contributes to how stressful that game is.
Yeah.
Especially when you have the village sequence like right at the beginning.
I mean, I definitely never liked that. It's kind of one of the reasons I couldn't get into playing 4,
Yeah.
just because I knew I would hate that mechanic.
I
Yeah.
tried to
But-
play 4 recently and I could not deal with that. I just still can't.
Like recently, what was it? They did Village. How they re-added a third-person mode.
Right.
That'd be kind of interesting to see if they like re-enabled that for like 4's remaster, to where
Yeah.
not that it's gonna make you a first-person mode, but it's old controls.
Yeah.
That would be kind of cool. I could see somebody modding that into the game.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool to see.
I don't think it's like as big of a barrier compared to like the camera shift with like a fixed camera versus an over the shoulder camera, but I do agree that it is definitely jarring if you haven't like experienced that. That's one thing that kind of a lot of people argued about going in. They're like, are they going to keep the classic control because it was such a big part of like what made Resident Evil 4 scary? But yeah, it's not there for the remake, which
You can
I'm
just
okay
pretend
with.
it's there. Just don't move.
Yeah, just don't move while you're aiming.
Well, I don't know. You guys aren't like big Nintendo nerds, so I guess I have to bring this up. But Metroid Prime just had a remaster, and the way they did it, they had controls
This is
the same as the original,
Yeah.
the Wii version, and a new version that is like Resident Evil 4, where you can move while you're aiming, which makes the game significantly easier, but you can also just switch back to the
Yeah.
old ways. And that's probably what they should have did.
Funnily enough, I have recently started to branch out and play some more Nintendo games, and I have a hot take with Metroid Prime.
I have introduced Metroid Prime to this man.
'Cause
You don't like it, or you do like it?
I think it's overrated. So what I did, because I wanted to kind of experience Metroid like how it originally was, so I picked up Metroid Dread, played through that, then picked up Prime, played Prime, and I think Dread just does everything better.
2D Metroid
Yeah.
is something a lot of people debate. It's like,
Yeah.
that's like a podcast
Like-
in itself.
Right, yeah, and we might review Prime at some point. Because, but I don't know. I think when you take the elements of Metroid, which is very much like upgrade, collectathon, backtracking, using new tools to go back and explore previous areas, and I think it just does not work very well in first person. Because your traversal is very slow.
See, now for
It
me,
is a lot slower.
I pictured Metroid Prime as a Zelda type game.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I figured, because it's
puzzle.
literally very similar. You have these different biomes, which are kind of considered like your temples in Zelda. You get an upgrade, and then you can go backtrack and move on to stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought of it. Like it's definitely, you're right. It's a step back from the Castlevania aspect that Metroid always had, the Metroidvania, but it's also not entirely designed to be that way. So it's more of the 3D Metroids are a lot different than 2D, and I would argue the same thing with Zelda. The 2D games are always different from the 3D games.
Yeah.
We'll go back to
They're
Resident Evil.
they're separate genres in themselves.
Yeah.
So like I said, it could be a podcast in itself.
It probably will be, because it is another game this year that I like to rank games, and I'm right now thinking Prime, at best, will be an honorable mention, but I haven't finished it, but I'm pretty close. But
It's
it's
at
a
least in my
remake.
top 10.
yeah, we'll talk about it at some point.
It's not even like a remake from a game design standpoint. They just remastered the
They did-
textures and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, they did a full texture remaster control.
Well, this one is
update.
labeled as just a remaster,
Yep.
Yeah.
which,
It's
if
not
they
a
did
remake.
call it a remake, I'd be like, I don't know. I never played the original, though, which I think is...
So far, you could say, picture to picture, old and new.
Yeah.
They're
The
the
only
same.
thing you're going to notice is the texture update.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The
just
graphics.
continuing in the tangent, I think it's a game you probably have to have the nostalgia for it to, really love. I think it's a fine game.
I like 2 more than 1, which is a hot take. Not everybody agrees with that, but I started with 2.
I never got to play any of the other two, so I'll need to do that eventually.
Okay, well, let's wrap up the Metroid tangent.
Yeah, we'll close that out. It's not the place for it.
So
I just
back
wanted to
into
bring up the
Resident
control
Evil.
thing.
We finished
Yeah.
with 4, and we're on to...
Well, you know what? I hate Nintendo's controls, though. Let me reopen this tangent real quick.
It's let's stop this tangent. But hold on.
They map it so stupidly. That's it. We're done. Yeah, Resident Evil 4, good game. Even better with the remake, but we'll get to that in a future review. So the next title, chronologically, this is one that you can kind of pick and choose whether or not you consider it to be a core title, but Resident Evil Revelations. This one I did play a little bit. I think I got probably less than halfway through, but it was fine. I know this is another one a lot of people really like, but I think it's not super great.
You want to hear another story time with Tony?
Oh yeah.
So I was playing that game, and it was on the 3DS. So you can turn the slider and see it in 3D, and your eyes are like, "Whoa, this is cool!" And then I had my cousins over while I was playing it, and then I gave it to my little cousin, and I was like, "Oh, you want to try this game?" And I knew this jump scare part was gonna come up, so she was playing it. We're all watching her. And then the jump scare happens, and she literally throws the 3DS in the air, and it hits the ceiling and falls down on the couch. And I was like, "All right, that's enough of that." So I don't know if horror games were meant to be in handheld because of people that just throw them when they get scared.
I don't know if you guys ever played the mobile version of Five Nights at Freddy's, but that was a high school pastime of mine.
Breaker.
Yeah, just Revelations I think is a fine game. I wasn't a huge fan of the enemy design. You fight these one thing we're kind of missing to go back to the beginning when we refer to Resident Evil as being a zombie-esque franchise, it is based on bioweapons, so each game has a different virus that you see. I'm gonna completely...
T-virus.
Yeah, I know there's T virus, G virus, ABC123 virus, I don't know, redfish, bluefish virus. But
So that's why there's fish monsters.
Yeah.
There's Ebola. There's COVID.
But Resident Evil Revelations, I think it was called the T Abyss virus, and they're like goopy fish monsters basically. And just they look very blobby, and I didn't really care for them, but I know some people like the game. But
I like that you're kind of like on like a ship.
Yeah, the setting is
That's
really
cool.
cool, and it kind of I think you play as Chris for part of the game. I'm trying to remember who you start as. I don't know if it's Jill or Claire.
It's like some girl. I don't remember.
Yeah. But it's fun. Not my favorite. Definitely haven't finished it, but maybe I'll revisit it at some point. But now we can move on to what many people pin as being kind of the downfall of Resident Evil, at least for like at the time it came out.
It was a little dip.
Yeah, a little
in the quality.
Dip in quality for sure. And this is like in the prime time where a lot of game studios were like, "Hey, co-op."
And you have to remember, in this year of when Resident Evil 5 came out, it was all like, oh, we got to make the graphics look as real as possible, and now they look like turkey scraps on a grill. And you know, it's just like, and zombie games were so popular then too.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, okay, so like Dead Island is a thing, and like all these other games are coming out that are very similar to it.
Yeah.
And they're like, zombies have been beaten and done to death in video games by this point. So
Right.
they were like, let's just make it like an action game to fit into the current environment of the zombie genre. And I mean, it pays off in a gameplay standpoint. It's a very fun game. However, like, people didn't like it because it betrayed what everybody kind of had a thought
Right.
of what Resident Evil was.
Especially
at that point.
coming off Resident Evil 4, which Resident Evil 4, granted, does have a lot of action.
They
'cause,
all do.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally in for, like, roundhouse kicking zombies.
Roundhouse
so-
kicking, you got like the drop.
There's always a part of Resident Evil, especially towards like the latter half, where you have like machine guns and rocket
Right.
launchers, and you're just mowing down
Yeah.
people, and it's more of an action game at that point.
I think the key with survival horror in general, if it is going to be like mixed with action, is just balancing it. This is something I always point to Dead Space 2 as a good example, because Dead Space 2 did have a lot of action and set pieces, but the way it balanced it does not leave the horror behind. And co-op, to me, like co-op kills any chance of a game being scary,
Yeah,
unless they do it really well.
yeah.
I could see
it's
like
hard
a
to
cool
manage
co-op
that.
where it's like you split up
Yeah.
and it's like trying to reconnect. That's like part of the horror. You're both experiencing your own things
Right.
while
So-
you're apart. That'd be kind of interesting.
In 5, there is a part like that. It's kind of towards the beginning. You both get split up, and you go down different hallways, and there's a boss, and he rotates between the rooms you're in, and you have to like push like levers in one room to affect the other person's rooms. And it was really well done. Like, I think 5 does have some really good like set pieces to it,
Yeah.
but it's just like, it's the story and the way they like try
The
to
story.
it's just the way they try to take things. And then Chris Redfield's like punching a boulder, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, it gets a little kooky for sure. And this is the one where Wesker goes like full Matrix.
he's got like the Neo glasses
Yeah.
and the trench coat and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like still a game a lot of people enjoy. I didn't play it co-op, so I definitely got like the worst way to play it just by yourself, but it's fine. Like I actually played these recently, both 5 and 6, because I just wanted to get the story. But yeah, 5 is fine. It's not my favorite. Definitely, probably not one I would play again unless it was like co-op for fun.
Co-op
whatever.
for fun. Just be like, oh, I need to play this, so I guess I'll play it.
So
Yeah.
like, little fun fact, I guess. I mean, a lot of people probably know this, but like Resident Evil 4, when it came out, had like a multiplayer to it. And it is very reminiscent of 5, like how it played. So like, I think they made that Resident Evil 4 multiplayer thing, and they're like, oh, we can make a whole game out of this. That's probably what they did.
Okay. But jumping from there, what is arguably one of my least favorite games in the series is Resident Evil 6, which I had the displeasure of playing too. Neither of you have played this one, right?
No,
I don't think
not
so.
extensively. I
Yeah.
played a little bit.
Yeah, I played through the whole thing, and like I'll give it credit because there are some things it does that are pretty unique. Like you have different playthroughs that give you like different characters, which is kind of neat. But what ends up happening is like this game is just way too long, and I don't even know if it's like actually long, but it felt very long. It's
That's
just
not good.
yeah. Yeah, this one goes way into the action. And there's some cool set pieces. Like you get the part where an outbreak happens in a city while you're in it, which is really cool. But then it just keeps going and it's just a lot of action and it's pretty over the top. And yeah, I left it just kind of being glad that I was done playing it.
I think they try to make 6 like a love letter to every person who liked
Yeah.
the series because they cover like every character.
Right.
And like they all make like a cameo and it's supposed to be like one big
Yeah.
finale.
And there are some cool parts. Like you get a part where Chris and Leon run into each other and kind of have like a bro off. But
I'm the coolest. No, I'm the coolest.
yeah, it's a game. One of my least favorites, which we will rank them at some point during this episode, but we have 2 more games to discuss, which are kind of what a lot of people are now painting as being like the revitalization of the franchise. So let's kick on over to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which this is a good game.
Good,
It's a good game.
This so I remember, Tony, I went to your house to start playing Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
And the whole first like hour, 2 hours of this game still are like very intense and scary to me,
Yes.
and I'm kind of a bitch when it comes to playing the beginning of this game because I remember your parents got mad at me because I was like audibly being a little scaredy cat.
That was funny. I enjoyed it. It was funny.
Yeah, it's really good. Like Resident Evil 7, me and Jeremiah have had debates on it because I think the first half of the game works much better than the second half.
Yeah. I agree.
But what a start to a game. Just like
There's definitely that change to it, and like I don't feel like we've had like a disagreement. Like I
Yeah.
totally agree that like the first half is definitely more the horror survival aspect, to where in the end half, going through the mines, you're
It's
just
the-
mowing down enemies to
Yeah.
get through
The
everything.
second the goop monsters pop up on the ship and
Yeah.
they try to go all revelations,
right.
it's like
Yeah,
that's
that's
when the game starts to kind of.
Although I do like,
It's
because
still
like
good.
when you swap to Mia in that part,
Mhm.
that's like a pretty good spot because you don't have any of your stuff.
yeah.
You're having to like acquire all this stuff. It adds to the story, which I really liked.
Yeah.
And then you go back to Ethan, and then you kind of have a few things. So then you're trying to like get through, find more stuff. But then right after the ship, it goes back into this just like, okay, I can kill everything now. I have a
Right.
grenade launcher. I've got tons of ammo.
Yeah, I don't. This is a feeling I get pretty common with the game where like you'll play through it, but then you'll remember one part of the game, and like as you get to that part, you're like, this part.
Most games have like a part like that. There's a few games far between where you're like, oh, this game's perfect throughout
Yeah.
the whole run.
Dead Space.
Yeah.
At least a new one.
It's even like my favorite game is like Bloodborne, and there's
Yeah.
a couple like levels in that where I'm just like it's the woods level in Bloodborne. Whenever I get to that part, I'm like, oh fuck.
Mine was always just Dark Souls. Anytime you got to like the poison area where the
Yeah.
entire ground's covered in poison, it's like, ow, all my poison clumps.
Right. Yeah, so that for me in Resident Evil 7 is definitely the ship. It's cool for the story, but it just like is so different from the first half of the game. Because like when you're looking at the characters, like the first half of Resident Evil 7 always makes me think of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a way.
Yeah.
Because like you've got, what was their name? The family.
It's Joe Baker.
Baker.
Marguerite Baker.
Zoe.
Zoe.
Zoe. However you say her name.
It's Zoe.
I'm pretty sure it's Zoe. Yeah.
No, it's got a Louisiana accent.
Zoe!
Wow.
I say it angry like Joe.
Yeah.
And then,
Lucas.
Lucas, yeah.
Yeah. So you have the Baker family, which, again, Resident Evil 7's focused on, like, the biohazard aspect. So these guys are all being influenced by something, which we're not going to worry too much about spoilers because if the game's been out, we're just talking about it in general. But you have, what did they call the girl, what was her name?
Evelyn.
Evelyn.
Oh yeah.
That's
What
her
is
like
Emily?
given name, but it was like EV1 or something.
Yeah. So what do they call her? It's just a bioweapon, right?
She is a bioweapon.
Okay.
She was given like part of the mold, which
Yeah.
the mold is like the cause of it, but she is the host.
Yeah. So the way the story, and this is what I really do like about the ship sequence, is like the way it ties into the story is like Evelyn is the cause for the ship kind of,
Crashing.
ending up where it does in Louisiana by the Baker family. Then you see the part where the Bakers are normal, which is just like
I loved all like
yeah.
because they had like all the DLCs that added to the game.
Mhm.
You have a prequel like prelude before, so you
Yeah.
get to see what happens,
right.
and you have an after as well.
Yeah, the
The
DLC
after was funny.
The DLC was really good. But you see, like, Jack Baker bring Evelyn to the house along with Mia, and then everything just kicks off from there, where Evelyn quickly, like, converts the Baker family into these very crazy, gross people. Marguerite Baker, still one of the scariest, like...
Absolutely, all of like her scenes are terrifying.
Yeah. The first part, when you go to fight her and she busts through the wall, I was like, no.
No.
I'm good. When you drop the lamp down in the hole and you see her like spindly hand reach it and pull it into the tunnel, I'm like, I know I have to go through that tunnel. But maybe later. But yeah, it's just really solid. Like the first half is amazing. Everything with Jack Baker being another like Mr. X.
It's Joe Baker.
It's not Joe.
It's Joe, Jax's brother.
Is it? No.
I thought Jack was the guy.
Jack's the
main guy.
the dude guy.
What?
Yeah.
Ethan.
Yeah. What?
Ethan Winters is your character.
Yeah.
Joe is the
Oh, it was Jack.
It's Jack. You're off.
Margaret.
Well, then wait, is it
Marguerite
maybe it's
calls him Jack.
backwards. So maybe Jack is the one that he keeps fighting, and Joe is his brother.
I don't remember the brother's name, but Jack
It's like
is
the lumberjack alligator punching guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have Jack Baker being like a Mr. X-esque type enemy in the beginning where he's like pursuing you.
Yes.
And this is the kind of horror that always is most effective against me, is like when you can't fight back. And yeah, he's scary. But
The garage scene is still.
yeah.
It's like funny at the same time as it is terrifying and
Yeah.
like suspenseful.
Nice ride.
Nice
I
ride.
always laugh at that part. That part always gets me.
Just kicks you out of the car.
That part is so absurd. I just laugh.
Right.
I love how there's like so many different options to it too. Like if you take too long, he'll take the car. If
Right.
you get in the car, he can still kick you out if you don't grab the key.
Yeah.
And he can like take over the car anyway with you
Mhm.
driving it.
Yeah, and then just shifting from there, like I mentioned with Marguerite Baker, her whole section, like every time you shift to dealing with one of the key family members, it's like entirely unique. Even where Lucas Baker is kind of like reminiscent of Saw and other
Yeah.
similar stuff, where he's like having you go through his little game. It's just good stuff. And then unfortunately, the game kind of shifts gears and swaps over to like Resident Evil. Like you mentioned, Revelations. It becomes much more of a shooter and less of a survival horror game, in my opinion. But with the next game we're going to talk about, like I think they fixed it to the point where Resident Evil 8 is... I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's arguably my favorite in the series.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that. For me, like 7 is what brought me into the Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
I've always known about like the past games. I just never really got to play a lot of them.
Mhm.
I didn't play a full Resident Evil game until 7.
Okay.
7 was my introduction, my beginning for these, and it started my like fandom for all these games. And then they just keep remastering them, so I'm just like 7 is what started
Yeah.
this all for me.
Yeah.
This is kind of the new starting point for like more modern fans of the series.
Right, and that is the one thing that's really nice with 7 is it is capable of kind of standing on its own. Like, it does have references to the series. Like, you do see good old Chris Redfield showed back up, which is cool. It's just, if the second half was as strong as the first half, I would like it a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it has that drop-off for me that kind of prevents it from being like a S-tier Resident Evil game. But yeah, let's talk about Resident Evil 8. This one's pretty recent still. Village.
So I've only seen up to the end of the castle portion where she turns into like a big dragon thing.
You missed a lot towards the end.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I like see like when this game first was coming out, the castle is all they showed.
Right.
Really. And
That's
all I'm like aware of, that's all I was picturing was like, oh, we're gonna be in this castle forever. So this thing's gonna be huge. It's like barely an hour long if you're doing your speed run. It is short.
Yeah. 8 I just love because like 8 I think is a very consistent game the whole way through, and it kind of takes, I don't know if you guys played Far Cry 5, but it's like a Far Cry 5 approach where you're going like section to section in the world, and each section again has its own like unique enemy and kind of play style
aspect for their like area.
So you start off, you know, you're interacting with the villagers, you're kind of getting a feel for what's going on. There's like werewolves and stuff, which I love the enemy variety. That was another complaint I had with 7, is that second half, the enemy variety sucks.
Which one with goop monsters?
It's all goop monsters.
What else is there? It's goop.
It's just a different, you have normal goop monster, you have the extra large goop monster.
You've got a goop monster
Extra
with a blade. You've got crawling goop monster.
Goofy Gooper.
Yeah, but 8 kind of has a bigger mix where you've got like vampires, werewolves, which is the first time Resident Evil's kind of branched into that territory, which I thought was cool. But yeah, you start off in the castle with Lady Dimitrescu, which was there's a particular word I'm looking for.
Waifu of the year?
Waifu of the year.
Sure. The Resident Evil waifu of many of its players. But yeah, so like her section is great. You shift over like everything. I think arguably the weakest section is probably the one with the fish dude. And even that I thought was like a lot of fun.
I had actually heard too for that scene that they had cut a bit of stuff from the game just so they could kind of speed things a little bit along. Yeah. His fight actually took a little bit longer, but his fight could have been better.
I like his boss fight. Like I don't think it's bad.
It's not bad. Like I said, they just cut some of like the steps into getting to his full fight.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't know her name, but the girl who had the doll.
Her name is hard to remember.
It's I don't know.
Yeah.
Her section is entirely different.
Her section was definitely by far the best terrifying moment.
Yeah.
Until you've played it like 4 times and you're just hating it.
It kind of shifts. Like you enter the manor or whatever it is, her home, but just like the scenery getting to her house looks so awesome. But you lose your weapons, you go down, and then you're essentially shifting over to like imagine like a Bloober Team, like Layers of Fear-esque kind of gameplay where you're walking simulator in a sense. You're like just solving puzzles, getting through, but then you do get an enemy that follows you throughout at a part, which is I won't spoil that for you, Tony, but
is the mannequin part?
No, that's actually the DLC.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is something else.
That looks terrifying. I always saw clips of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that part's really cool. And then, of course, when you shift over to dealing with Heisenberg and his factory, which was very fun. Kind of.
Yeah, that added a lot of stuff, too, because then you get the cyborg enemy.
Yeah. What did they... I don't know the names of anything in this game, but you get like a really cool mechanized enemy that you have to like... Kind of like Resident Evil 4, where you have to shoot the key part of the regenerator. Mm-hmm. Similar, where you're shooting like key components of their armor.
They're almost like Iron Man ripoff chess piece, you know.
And then just the boss fights. Like this game is so consistently good.
Yeah, everything is different. Like all boss fights were different. You had different like ways of defeating your boss. Mm-hmm. Like every room was different. I'd say the only one that had similarities is the fish guy, and Dimitrescu, because you're just basically using your normal weapons for both of them.
The Heisenberg boss fight is very over the top and awesome, though.
It was fun.
I just remember the one part because Chris is kind of mentioned throughout, and you see Chris in the beginning, which I am avoiding spoilers on this one for you because I do think you should play it. But there is one part where Heisenberg takes a jab at Chris, and he's like, "That boulder punching asshole." Yeah, a lot of fun with that one, and then just the way it wraps up and Ethan's story.
See, that's why Capcom is hilarious. And like they'll notice their own mistakes and they'll make fun of it too.
Yeah. And then we did get the Shadows of Rose DLC, which I really thought Rose would maybe get her own game, but
I so hoped. I wanted them to continue this. I wanted to get a little bit more from Ethan as well.
Yeah.
I'm still standing by that he is there at the end. It's real.
Which episode did we have this debate in? I don't even remember.
Probably our Ari. Actually, I don't know. It was some review we did a while ago. I still stand by my point.
There's some speculation at the end of Resident Evil 8, but I think Jeremiah's wrong.
I know you do. I can be hopeful though. Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, from Resident Evil 8, so we do have Resident Evil 4's remake currently out that we're playing through, which, again, we'll hopefully have a review in the next couple weeks. But, yeah, so as far as, like, going game by game, that's the general breakdown. But just there's a question to ask, and it's why do we even like this franchise?
Like I said, 7 was my intro, and it's that thrill that, like, we've had to talk about this before in, like, previous episodes, where it's just like, why do we like horror? Why are we drawn to it? And it's the suspense, it's the thrill of surviving something we probably won't survive in real life.
Most definitely not Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Definitely will.
I'd be dead.
Definitely will curl into a fetal position if I got sucked into Resident Evil's world.
Yeah.
Like, well, this sucks.
Especially if you're Ethan Winters in the beginning of 7 and you just instantly get your hand chopped off.
Hand, foot, depending on how terrible you are, you get both chopped off.
Yeah.
Just put some goop on it.
It heals. It does heal.
Yeah, I think the reason I love the series as a whole is like each game just kind of follows a formula that I think really works. Like you've got inventory management, which is pretty key to like good survival horror, you know, managing ammo and health and like limited inventory space, interesting enemies, boss fights. Like every game is just really fun to play. And I wouldn't pin Resident Evil 7, or sorry, Resident Evil in general as being like a very scary franchise. There are certainly moments like 7 and parts of 8 that really do cross over into like the
good horror aspect.
But it's just a fun franchise. And I think because of how like wildly varied each title is in terms of like what you're dealing with or what the overall story is, there's a lot of fun to be had because, you know, no one game is like very similar to another.
Mm-hmm.
Each game is kind of unique in its own way. But yeah, what about you, Tony?
I think I like it for those same reasons, like the survival kind of horror thing. I think it delves into horror just enough to be like, oh, this is fun, and not like Visage, where I'm like scared out of my mind to the point where I don't even want to finish playing it.
Yeah.
Like, Resident Evil puts me in just enough of a good headspace to be like, I can tackle this, and it's not overwhelming, but
Right.
it is a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it's
So
like
I'm scared, but I'm not super scared.
it's
And
like
that's why I like
just it's just stressful enough to like still be fun. Because I remember playing through like the Dead Space remake, a lot of the parts were just like very stressful.
it. Yeah.
And Visage, like you mentioned, that's one of the very few like horror games that I actually did not want to keep playing.
Yeah, I don't. Like, it's terrifying.
They took it off Xbox Game Pass, so I just couldn't keep playing.
But yeah, it's just a super fun series, and like there's a lot of parallels. Like I have Resident Evil 4 to thank for Dead Space, which I think Dead Space is probably my all-time favorite for survival horror. But
Evil Within, too. It's
Oh, yeah.
inspired by Resident Evil.
oh, that's true. I really
I love Evil Within.
yeah, Evil Within 2, I think is like one of my all-time favorite sequels to a
Very
game.
good, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
See, another thing too, like with Resident Evil that I also really liked is like it adds its own like gaming aspect as well by like having like challenges to do.
Yeah,
And it's not just, okay, here's our story. It's a good story, but that's it. You play it and it doesn't have a replay value. Where Resident Evil, they do. They give you challenges to complete, so that'll unlock new rewards, new
Right.
items to then go again. And like you get new stuff, and I always like that they've done that.
I know the Resident Evil franchise as a whole has always been a very fun playground for like speedrunners and everyone like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I love how they've added like that's a challenge too. Beat the game this fast to be able to unlock a reward.
You big tofu.
Big tofu.
Or there's all kind of stuff. I know there's like an infinite rocket launcher.
Infinite rocket launcher.
I like that.
In 8, they added a lightsaber.
So cool.
But with that, so I want us to kind of go through and rank the games, which this one, ordinarily I would do like a list and we would just go number by number. But since there's a pretty high degree of variance with the ones we've actually played, what I'm going to do is we're just going to go title by title and you will rank it from the classic tier of S to F.
Oh.
So starting, we'll just go through chronologically like we did. And there's also another tier called Have Not Played.
Can we rank things multiple S? Like 4 and 7 could be ranked as S? Okay.
So Resident Evil 0, Have Not Played.
Have not played.
Yeah, can we just put 0, Code Veronica, and both Revelations in that category?
I have played Revelation, so I do
Okay.
have a ranking for those.
Okay.
But 0 and Veronica, I'm pretty sure none of us have anything with.
No,
So.
never played.
Okay. So Resident Evil, this one, again, for me, will just be the remake or remaster or whatever of that one, which I'm going to throw this down into like, I guess the lowest will go as D tier, because I don't want to do the whole alphabet, but it's D tier for me just based on the fact that I cannot play with fixed camera.
I'd say C. It's not the camera for me, it's the tank controls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just something I could never deal with. I don't like the slow movement. If it was like Darkwood or something where you can kind of flip around really fast, I would like it a little more.
I know a lot of people really like the game, but I am a modern, pretentious gamer boy, so
Same.
I prefer my controls to be like pretty universal from title to title. And yeah, this is not one I can imagine myself being able to fully play through. So D tier for me. But what about you?
I will also give it that D tier
Yeah.
for needing better directional control.
Yeah.
I'll bump it to C just because it's a classic.
Yeah.
C for classic.
C for classic. There we go.
Resident Evil 2, and again, just like whichever version you've played, I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page with just playing the remakes. This one I will actually give straight to S tier because I think it is just so well crafted and like it's a remake that really accomplishes the goal of like remaking it. So
Absolutely.
S tier for me.
If I like sit down and like hash out a game like to it fully, like and I want to replay it again like right after, that's how I know it was like a really good game. Because I find it hard to like sit through and play games nowadays. Like I usually just play like a multiplayer or something more like less time consuming, I guess. So like when it comes to like a story based game, I played through Resident Evil 2 like multiple times. So yeah, S tier for me.
Okay.
For 2's remake, I'm definitely going to say it as well as an S tier. I loved the idea from, again, going from 7, being able to go back and play 2, getting to get that full list of games there to be able to play again. I loved it. It was fantastic. I loved 2 for just being able to go back and forth to different stories.
Yeah. It just has really good... It's like a super simple premise as far as how the game plays out. Like, you're just in Raccoon City, the outbreak happens, you're pushed into the police station, and you have the, like, typical sewer section and going down into the lab, but it's all just, like, so well done. Mr. X scares me.
He scares a lot of people.
Yeah. But the Resident Evil 3 remake, this one, I am not really sure. Because, like, I don't think it's outright a bad game. But there are a lot of things that definitely like don't make it as good or appealable as 2. So for me, it's probably like C tier, maybe like high end of C tier.
I give it a B.
Yeah.
I give it a B. Just like I enjoyed it. I was excited to play it. I like Nemesis. Like 3 is definitely like what's the word? Nostalgic for me. Just for like the idea of the game, the story.
Yeah. There is something beneficial to like having a short and sweet story because you can hop in and be done with that game in one sitting if you really want to.
Really wanted to.
Which is nice because like before 8 came out, I was playing like every game that I could. That's where I actually played 5 and 6 for the first time. But yeah, like just hopping into 3 and being done with it a few hours later, like that is the nice part. But there's just some things that make it not as good as 2's remake.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Mr. Tony?
I'd say the same thing. Like it's probably for me like C plus B minus somewhere in there.
Okay.
And the original is probably like a B.
Yeah. Okay. Code Veronica we have not played. The original Resident Evil 4. And this is one that's kind of interesting because there's a lot of things with it that don't hold up particularly well today. Like how we opened up with kind of the nod to Ashley being very annoying. Help me, Leon. Help me, Leon. But 4, I would actually probably give the original release like a B tier. As much as I love the game, I do think it's really good, but there's just a lot of things that don't hold up. Like the controls are kind of wonky. Ashley is one of the worst like partner NPCs I've ever experienced. But it's a very corny game, and there's a lot of charm to it for sure. But yeah, probably B tier. Might be a hot take. I don't know.
I'd give it like an A, just out of like a little more respect for it, because it did do a lot of things right.
Yeah.
But you know, you can also go back and complain about a lot of things.
Well, that's what's
it's older game.
Like I still consider it one of my favorite from the whole franchise. It's just looking at it now compared to when I first played it. Like there's a lot of stuff that I'm not as fond of as maybe I used to be. But
True.
Soon to be, the remake will have a place when we do the when we do the review for the remake. I'll probably mention where that ends up, but
I'd like to be in that one because I want to ask you guys what you think of the direction they took Ashley's character in.
Okay.
Because some people are divisive on it.
That's what I've heard too.
Do you really think a president's daughter? Do you think like George Bush's daughter was really like gonna be like a badass in that kind of situation, or do you think she's gonna be dead weight?
Right.
And that's kind of what Ashley was meant to be in the original. Is she is just dead
I mean,
weight.
I haven't gotten super far into 4. I'm in the castle right now, but
Already further than me.
yeah, so far she's still like dead weight, but I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe she shifts over and is like.
Because I've seen some like scenes where it looks like she's like handling things, but there was parts in the original towards the end where she kind of does some stuff too.
Yeah.
So like I don't know.
Yeah, from what I've heard
I'd
too,
have to
like
play it.
I've got my other friend playing it currently, and was telling me how she's like honestly like her AI could be worse almost than the original.
Oh, okay.
That she just keeps getting in the way or is just kind of just as
So
annoying.
maybe they kept her in good faith.
Yeah, one kind of funny tangent, because you know how what'll happen is like the Las Plagas dudes can like pick her up, throw her over the shoulder, and start walking away with her. And there was a part where I pulled out my sniper and I was trying to shoot the guy in the head, and I shot her like square in the spine. And I just imagine like if that actually happened, I'd have to call the president and be like, "Hey, Mr. President, so Ashley, she fell."
They killed her. They destroyed her spine. I couldn't save her. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
It's
laughed.
crazy. This old man child sniped her right in the back. It's crazy.
My question is, like, would he even assume she would be alive? Like, look at the entire cult and city, and it's just like, you expect me to keep her alive that long with this going on?
Yeah. Oh man, that's true.
But I know if I was in Ashley's shoes, I would probably be dead weight as well. So.
Yeah.
I don't know, like me in that kind of position, or someone's coming here to save me. I've been just kidnapped. I'm surrounded by monstrous psychos. I'm doing whatever the person saving me is telling me to do. If they tell me to crawl, I will crawl on the ground out of the way.
I think they improved like the controls for her, because you can basically either tell her to like stay close or stay back.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a few spots where you can tell her to hide. Like if
I've seen a couple
available,
spots you can tell her to hide in.
Yeah, it's not too bad. She's definitely still not the best. I mean, like, I always point to, like, Elizabeth from BioShock as being, like, an example of a really good non-playable partner, so, yeah.
But at least with that, she can't die.
Yeah.
Like, she can't take any damage.
if you shoot her in the spine, she can. I got a mission failed right away.
Elizabeth in Bioshock?
Oh, no, I'm talking about Ashley.
No, yeah, I know. I'm talking about Bioshock's character.
Yeah.
Like, that one, she cannot die.
Yeah.
That's kind of a little what makes her, like, super strong as, like, a background character helping you out.
Yeah.
Constantly throwing you health or ammo.
Right. So 5 and 6, I don't know how much you guys have played and or experienced, but like 5 I think is better than 6 and would probably be, I mean both of them are still pretty meh. So like 5 would be like low C tier for me at best.
I give them a H as in have not played.
Yeah.
I'd give it like a B plus in like the gameplay side and the story, like Chris Redfield being like an absolute G.
Yeah.
Like a D rank. So like it kind of evens out to like a C tier game.
I do think it kind of fits that unique category where it's like on its own, unattached from the broader title, Resident Evil 5 is probably a good game. I just don't think it's a good Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
Like it's just a good thing to talk about, like we mentioned with survival horror. Like the moment you add co-op, it takes away a lot of what could make it scary, but it adds a lot of what could make it a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably great to play with a friend if you're just doing it for like shits and giggles. But
oh yeah,
that's fair.
It's totally going with a friend.
Yeah, that's too like co-op. Like as long as it's not required, then that's what makes that like a better choice. Because then it's like, oh, I want to be more serious. I want to dive into this game. Maybe get scared. You play by yourself.
Yeah.
But then, like, oh, I want to go have some fun with my friend, kill some zombies.
Yeah.
Then you get your friend to come join you.
I think I frown upon co-op and survival horror because it stopped Dead Space from being, like, the best trilogy of all time.
Oh, yeah. I see where you're going there.
Kind of left it.
Like, I don't know. Co-op has its place, and it's fun. And I think a lot of people who play Resident Evil aren't co-op people.
Right.
So I think that's the reason they get the reputation they do, those two games. It's because of, they're trying to do a solo experience that wasn't meant to be a solo experience, really.
Yeah, that's fair. Resident Evil 6, I'll throw straight to D tier. Don't really have to think about that one.
Yeah. From what I've seen and played, it's probably D.
Yeah. You haven't played that one at all, right, Jeremiah?
Mm-mm.
Okay. But now we can jump to 7 and 8, which 7 I will give A tier. Just because the second half, not as good as the first, but it was very close to being like an S tier title. The first half is like S plus tier, but the second half is just enough to bring it down for me.
I'm exactly
I give it SS rank.
SSGSS. You don't get that reference because you're not a Dragon Ball Z fan.
No.
What about you, Tony?
I'm gonna give it an A as well. Okay. I like the first half very much, but I do agree that the goopy ship. I mean, the ship itself was like good, but it's mostly just afterwards that it like.
I'll admit, like the ship is kind of for me, like you said, that one part. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like as soon as you get through it, you go to the mines, and then you kind of just speed your way towards the end.
The mines, I think the mine is like worse than the ship because at least the ship part is interesting for the story.
Aesthetics too.
Yeah, the mine is literally just a traversal, which that's kind of why I don't really rank that into the entire game. It's just a pathway to get to a part. If it had story in there, that would definitely make it more kind of added. It does add lore to the story because you find like their lab, you find a lot of the background stuff.
Right.
So that's why I like it because it throws in that's like this place has been used as a base by somebody.
I also, one thing I forgot to mention with 7 is it has one of the like weirdest narrative like parts where you have to make a decision. That always was like super weird to me because the part where you have Zoe and and you have to choose who to give the vial to. And I'm like, who's going to choose Zoe? That's what I was trying to figure out. Like, in what world? But yeah.
Dude comes all this way after 3 years.
I guess if you really have a thing for like Louisianan girls.
Well, I guess, your girlfriend chops off your hand in the beginning, so maybe you change your mind.
She cuts you up a lot, so it's like, I might not like you that
maybe
much
you're
anymore.
Like, I don't know about this girl.
I know I drove this way like 3 years apart, and I finally found you again, but it's like, I'll pick her, I guess.
Yeah, and then Resident Evil 8, another very easy decision for me. This one I'll put up with Resident Evil 2 in S tier. Because of how consistently good it is, like, it's definitely...
S+ tier.
Yeah.
I'll have to put it in the have not played, but
okay.
from what I have seen, I would put it in like an A.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, though, that I have like disliked with some and quite a few of these games that I have played are my trophies are unobtainable for like platinuming, because some of them have like the most challenging freaking trophies to get, and some of them even included like the new multiplayer modes or like the challenge mode, which is like mercenary or stuff. And I just can't do some of them. They're just so annoying. That's like my only thing I dislike with some of those.
I hate achievements that are like multiplayer,
Right.
like based ones, because sometimes you just suck at multiplayer and you can't do it.
Yep.
It's like fighting games.
That,
it's like,
and then if
reach
it's like
A tier, and it's like, I'm not a combo smashing lunatic. Like half these people play this game.
and then
can't do
sometimes
that.
like their game may not just have like a good multiplayer, so then there's like no one else playing it,
Oh,
so
yeah.
then you
That
can't
was
even
like
get a game to
Last
play
of
it.
Us is multiplayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, one game I think we skipped over was Revelations 2,
Yeah.
which I don't
forgot
think
about
you
that.
guys have played, right?
No.
Okay, that is one I played. Probably B tier. I remember having fun with it. I don't really remember the story too much, but it was the first Resident Evil to actually be episode based, which was another kind of game design choice that was kind of popular at the time.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I remember I had fun with it. But yeah. So that, I think, pretty much wraps up everything with just talking about Resident Evil in general. It's just a really fun franchise, very long-running franchise, but thankfully not one that ever really feels repetitive. I mean, 5 and 6 definitely did for me, but yeah, it's just a good time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the episode here, unless you guys have any closing footnotes.
Not really.
No.
Kind of been able to go over a lot of it, and I'm really looking forward to finishing RE4 here.
Yeah.
And then I want to say, like, because they did announce some new games for Resident Evil. Looks like we're going to get one in Japan.
Okay.
And I'm excited for what's to come, for sure.
Okay. I guess one question to pose in closing here is, if you had to pick like one particular character from the entire franchise to like label as your favorite, who would it be?
I mean, I really like Claire, and I wish she had more like screen time.
Yeah.
But I'd probably just give it to Leon, because he's always been my favorite.
Yeah. If you play Revelations 2, that one's a more Claire focused game.
Oh, okay.
Leon as well would definitely be my like go-to character, because other than 7 and 8 that doesn't get to see him at all, playing Leon has been really cool, getting to see his character. Ethan is definitely like another tied character, because those were my like intro character for me. And then just because I know him all really well just throughout is Chris Redfield.
Yeah. I think for many people it is probably between Leon and Chris. I really do like Claire and Jill. Like, those 4 characters are definitely the strongest from the entire franchise. But I probably have to agree with saying Leon, because I think at this point it's the character I've spent the most time playing as, just between like the Resident Evil 2 remake and now the 4. You play as him in 6 as well. So yeah, he's a good character. Cool. I like his haircut. Ada Wong. But yeah, so with that, if you guys made it to this point in the episode, I just want to take a moment to thank you for listening. If you would like to support us on social media, we are on Twitter and Instagram, if you check the description on the podcast here. And we are also on YouTube if you want to support us there. So with that, we thank you again for listening, and we hope to catch you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.
Leon, help me!
Goodbye, Leon.
Leon!